It began on a slow evening when the day felt heavier than usual. The world outside was noisy, and the person inside the small apartment felt tired from everything going on in life. They were not someone who usually searched for deep meaning in music. Most days passed in a blur of routine sounds, the ticking of a clock, the hum of traffic, and the quiet buzz of digital notifications. Life felt the same day after day. They were cleaning a corner of the room that had been untouched for months. Dust had settled on old boxes, forgotten books, and items packed away with no plan to revisit. While rearranging things, one box fell open on its own. Inside it were little objects from their childhood, pieces of the past that had once meant something. But something else caught their eyes, something they didn't even remember seeing before. It was a small wooden music box. The wood had tiny scratches, but it had a charm that time could not take away. When they picked it up, it felt heavier than expected, almost as if it carried memories. They held it gently, running a finger over its carvings, wondering where it came from. They tried to recall who might have owned it. It must have been from a family member, maybe someone older, who valued things that last. Curiosity pulled them in. They turned the small metal key attached to it. The music box clicked softly as the winding began. Then, a few seconds later, a bright and cheerful melody played. It was light, full, and so surprisingly alive for something so old. The sound filled the room in a way no digital speaker ever had. The melody was simple, charming, and elegant. Even without knowing the name, they felt as if they had heard it somewhere before in a cafe, in a movie, maybe in a childhood moment. The tune wrapped around the room like soft sunlight breaking through cloudy weather. They sat down beside the box, letting the melody wash over them. For the first time that day, their heart felt a little lighter. They closed their eyes and listened. It did something unusual. It made them curious. Why did the melody feel so comforting? Why did it sound familiar? Why did it hold a feeling that words couldn't describe? It was almost like the music was speaking directly to them. When the melody stopped, they stayed still for a moment. Then they wound the box again, letting the tune play once more. And again. Each time, the melody felt a little deeper, as if it was opening a small door inside them. They didn't know it yet, but this small moment was about to start something new. Later that night, they looked up the melody using a sound search. The results showed the title, Ein klein Nachtmusik. It was by Mozart, a name they had heard many times, usually in school textbooks or old documentaries, but never paid serious attention to. They clicked on the full version of the piece out of pure curiosity. As it played, their room suddenly felt different. The music had a freshness that made the air feel softer. It had energy, but it wasn't loud or overwhelming. It had style, but it wasn't complicated. It simply flowed and made them feel awake inside. They listened to it all the way through, sitting quietly. Not doing anything else. Something inside them shifted. They leaned back in their chair, thought about how they had spent so much time listening to music only for noise or distraction. But this was different. This was music that asked nothing from them except to listen. It didn't demand attention. It earned it. They felt calm but also curious. Classical music was a world they never explored. It always seemed too fancy or too distant from everyday life. Something that belonged in grand halls, not in simple rooms like theirs. But now, for the first time, they wondered whether they had been missing something. The next morning, the melody still stayed in their mind. It wasn't like a catchy tune that fades. It felt more like a gentle reminder. Something inside them wanted to hear more. After work, they played the music box again. The old wooden box felt warm in their hands. It made them think about the people who came before them. Maybe someone in their family had listened to this same melody long ago, maybe finding comfort in it just as they were now. They searched for other pieces by Mozart. They listened to Piano Sonata No. 16 and Symphony No. 40. Some parts felt lively. Some felt thoughtful, but all of it had a character that felt refreshing. The more they listened, the more they wanted to know. This new curiosity didn't feel forced. It felt natural, like discovering a forgotten path. They had no plan at first, no goal to become an expert in music. They only wanted to understand why these old pieces still mattered in a modern world. They started reading small articles about composers. Not heavy books, just simple stories online. They learned how Mozart wrote music with a sense of joy and freedom. They learned how certain pieces were created during difficult times yet still sounded graceful. They found it fascinating how someone long gone could create something that still touches people today. One evening, after listening to another classical playlist, they realized something else. The music made them feel more present. They weren't thinking about pressures, worries, or unfinished tasks. They were simply listening. It was a feeling they hadn't experienced in a long time. The music box remained on their desk, always within reach. Every time they wound it, they felt connected to something bigger than themselves. Something timeless. One small moment had opened a new door. They began to wonder what else was out there, what other legendary pieces they had never heard. What other melodies carried stories they had never known. They didn't know where this new path would go, but they were ready to follow it. That simple melody had become a guiding light, quietly inviting them into a world they were only beginning to understand. And slowly, without realizing it, their journey into classical masterpieces had begun. The first time they decided to attend a live orchestra performance, it felt like stepping into a world they had only seen from a distance. They had heard classical music through headphones and tiny speakers, but never in a place built for sound. They weren't sure what to expect. Maybe it would feel too formal, or too serious, or too quiet. But something inside them pushed gently, telling them to go. It was a weekend evening. The air was cool, and the sky looked soft, almost as if it was slowing down for the night. They walked toward the concert hall, feeling a mix of curiosity and nervousness. The building stood tall, with warm lights glowing through the glass. People were entering, some dressed neatly, others casually, proving that this world wasn't as strict as movies made it seem. Inside, the hall had a calm energy. Soft murmurs from the crowd, gentle footsteps on polished floors, and the quiet shuffle of programs being opened. Everything felt peaceful. They found their seat, which was not too close, but not too far either. It was just the right place to see everything. When the orchestra walked out, the room shifted. Conversations softened. People settled into their seats. There was a moment where time felt like it paused. Then the conductor appeared. The audience welcomed them with light applause. The first notes of Beethoven's Symphony No. 5 broke the silence. 4 strong beats filled the room, clear, powerful, unforgettable. It felt like the music reached straight into their chest. It wasn't just sound. It was emotion turned into movement. They had heard that opening before, but hearing it like this was something else. It was almost shocking how alive the sound felt. Each instrument added a new layer that headphones could never capture. The strings moved quickly, full of determination. The brass echoed like confident voices. The percussion gave the heartbeat to the music. As the symphony continued, they watched the musicians closely. Each person played with focus and passion. The conductor moved with energy, guiding every detail, shaping the sound with each gesture. It amazed them how so many people worked together to create one powerful moment. Something shifted inside them. The music wasn't just entertainment anymore. It felt like it was telling a story without words. A story of struggle, courage, and hope. They didn't need to understand musical terms to feel it. Their heart understood it very clearly. When the first movement ended, the audience sat still for a second, almost as if they were holding their breath. Then warm applause filled the hall. They found themselves clapping too, smiling a little without even noticing. During the slower parts of the symphony, the room felt strangely intimate, like each person was sharing the same quiet thought. The soft, gentle melodies reminded them of moments when life felt calm and safe. And when the music rose again, full of strength, they felt their own energy rising with it. As the symphony neared its end, they felt something unexpected. Gratitude. Not the kind someone forces themselves to feel, but the kind that arrives naturally when something moves the heart. The final notes came with a burst of brightness. The hall exploded with applause. People stood, Some cheered. They joined in, feeling as if they were part of something meaningful. When they stepped outside after the concert, the night air felt different. Lighter, cleaner. The world looked the same, but they didn't feel the same. On the way home, they couldn't stop thinking about the experience. It surprised them how much they enjoyed it. They thought they would feel out of place, but instead they felt connected to the music, to the moment, and even to people they didn't know at home. They sat quietly for a while. They replayed parts of the symphony in their mind. They remembered how the violins moved, how the brass sounded like bold voices, how the conductor guided everything with such passion. They realized something important. Classical music wasn't distant or old. It was alive. It was a voice that spoke across time. And now, it was speaking to them. The next day, they woke up with the melody still lingering in their thoughts. They felt eager in a way they hadn't felt in a long time. They played the music box again before leaving the house. The bright tune brought a soft smile to their face. During the week, they listened to different classical pieces during short breaks. Some pieces lifted their energy. Others made them feel calm. Some made them think about their life in a new way. It felt like each piece carried a different personality. One afternoon, while sitting with their headphones on, they noticed something interesting. Classical music made them focus more. When they worked on something challenging, the steady rhythm and balanced flow helped clear their mind. It was unexpected but welcome. A friend noticed the change and asked what they had been listening to lately. They didn't know how to explain it fully. They just said, "Something old but beautiful." That seemed enough. Their curiosity grew stronger with every new piece they listened to. They learned how Beethoven faced many struggles, but kept creating music that carried hope. Then they discovered more about Mozart, how he could turn simple ideas into something magical. Learning these stories made the music feel more human. This new interest didn't take over their life suddenly. It grew quietly, naturally. It was like adding a small lamp to a dark room, soft, warm, and comforting. One evening, they found themselves searching for another live performance to attend. It wasn't because they felt they needed to. It was because they wanted to feel that same sense of connection again. The music had become more than sound. It was becoming a companion, something that made them pause, breathe, and reflect. They began to notice small changes in their daily life. They felt calmer during stressful moments. They listened more carefully when others spoke. They found themselves thinking deeper about ordinary things. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was slow, gentle growth. Sometimes, after a long day, they would lie down and play a quiet classical piece. The soft notes felt like a warm blanket, lifting the weight off their shoulders. They didn't understand all the details of the music, but that didn't matter. They were learning that music didn't need to be understood perfectly to be meaningful. Late one night, while listening to a playlist of orchestral pieces, they realized how much their life had changed since the day they found the music box. It hadn't solved all their problems, and it didn't make life magically easier, but it brought something priceless. A sense of peace. And peace, they realized, was something they had been missing without noticing. The journey into classical masterpieces was no longer just a small curiosity. It had become a part of their daily life. A habit that made them feel balanced, awake, a little more connected to the world. They didn't know exactly what they would discover next, but for the first time in a long while, they looked forward to finding out. This new world of music had opened slowly, but now it felt wide and inviting. Ready to show them more? And they were ready to keep exploring. Their interest in classical music grew naturally, like a quiet seed settling into the soil and slowly opening. They didn't try to force themselves to learn everything at once. Instead, they followed their curiosity wherever it led, and it led them to a softer world when filled with gentle piano notes, late-night melodies, and emotions that didn't need words. One evening, after a long day that felt heavier than usual, they were lying on their bed, scrolling through different playlists. Their eyes were tired, and their mind felt stretched thin from responsibilities that kept piling up. They needed something calming, something that didn't demand energy. That was when they stumbled upon a piece called a nocturne, The word itself sounded peaceful, so they clicked on it. The first notes were delicate, like raindrops falling softly on a quiet street. The piano moved slowly at first, almost as if it wanted to give them time to breathe. Then the melody expanded, warm and full, carrying something gentle and sincere. It was a piece by Chopin. They didn't know who Chopin was beyond the name. But the feeling of the music didn't require any introduction. It made them think about long nights spent in silence, nights when the world felt both heavy and hopeful. The melody wasn't loud or dramatic. It was honest. It felt like someone sitting beside them, not to fix anything, but simply to be there. As they listened, something inside them softened. The tension in their shoulders eased. Their breathing slowed. The room seemed to grow warmer, or maybe their heart did. When the piece ended, they didn't rush to play the next one. They just sat there, letting the final notes linger. It was surprising how music could reach a place inside them that even words couldn't touch. Curious, they searched for more of Chopin's music. They discovered that he wrote many nocturnes, each one a different shade of emotion. They listened to several, one after another, and each one felt like a page from an intimate journal. Some nocturnes felt reflective, like thinking about old memories. Others felt tender, like a quiet conversation with oneself. One nocturne even made them feel a little sad, but in a peaceful way. As if the sadness had meaning. These gentle piano pieces became their late-night companion. Whenever their thoughts felt too loud, the music helped soften them. Whenever their mind felt scattered, the melodies gathered everything gently. They realized that classical music wasn't just about strength or grandeur. It could also be soft. It could hold someone's heart without squeezing it. A few days later, while working on something stressful, they searched for another calming piece. This time, a title caught their eye immediately: Clair de Lune. They had heard the name before but never listened to it carefully, the moment it began. They felt a kind of magic. The melody was slow and quiet, almost shy at first. Then it unfolded into something graceful and dreamy. It felt like moonlight on water, soft and shimmering, moving gently without rushing. The piece made them stop everything they were doing. They leaned back in their chair, closed their eyes, and let the music carry them. It made them think about peaceful nights. Moments when life felt simple. Moments when they didn't have to explain anything to anyone. It made them imagine standing near a calm lake under the night sky. Feeling the cool air touch their skin, the music felt like a memory. Even though they had never experienced the scene it painted, when the piece finished, their heart felt lighter than before. They didn't know that a single piece could change the whole atmosphere of a day, but it did. They searched for more information and learned it was composed by Debussy. The name sounded elegant, almost like the music itself. They were fascinated to discover that Debussy wrote pieces inspired by light, nature, dreams, and imagination. It made sense. His music felt like a dream you didn't want to wake up from. This discovery opened another door in their musical journey. They realized that classical music wasn't just one kind of emotion. It held many layers: courage, sadness, hope, dreaminess, reflection, warmth. They listened to Chopin when they needed comfort, and Debussy when they needed peace. Beethoven when they wanted strength, Mozart when they wanted brightness. Slowly, they started building a small playlist of pieces that connected to different parts of their life. One morning, they noticed something surprising. They played a gentle nocturne while getting ready for the day, and somehow, everything felt calmer. They moved slower, but with more intention. The usual rush didn't feel so loud. It made them realize that classical music wasn't something to listen to only during special moments. It could be part of ordinary days, too. It could turn a simple morning into something soothing. During lunch breaks, they listened to soft piano pieces instead of loud songs. During long evenings, they played Debussy to unwind. On nights when their thoughts refused to quiet down, a Chopin nocturne felt like a warm, familiar voice. The change didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, like the slow rise of sunlight in the early hours. One night, they were sitting by the window with a cup of tea. The sky outside was dark, Their room was quiet except for a single lamp. They played Claire de Lune again. As the music floated softly, they reflected on their journey. They thought about how they never used to care about classical music, how it felt distant, complicated, and almost intimidating. But now, it felt human. It felt personal. They realized that music from long ago wasn't just old sound. It was emotion preserved in time. It carried stories from hearts that lived before them, yet somehow understood them. They thought about the people who composed these masterpieces, how they must have felt when creating something so beautiful, how they used music to express emotions that words couldn't. The thought made them appreciate the music even more. Over time, they began noticing small lessons hidden inside each piece. Chopin taught them that it was okay to feel deeply. That softness wasn't weakness. That quiet emotions mattered. Debussy taught them the beauty of imagination. That life didn't always need to be sharp and defined. That dreams had meaning too. Beethoven had already shown them courage. Mozart had shown them elegance. Each composer felt like a different voice in their life, each one guiding them gently. They didn't suddenly become an expert listener. They didn't understand every detail of the music, but they understood how it made them feel, and that was enough. One day, while playing a nocturne, they realized that they were smiling without noticing. They felt grateful for something they never expected to care about. They shared one of the pieces with a friend. Hesitant, but hopeful. They didn't explain much, just said, "Try listening to this when you feel tired." A few days later, the friend said the music helped them sleep better. That simple feedback made them feel warm inside. They realized that music could be shared like kindness. Late one evening, they found themselves thinking about their life. The ups, the downs, the quiet struggles no one else saw. They played a slow nocturne as they reflected, and it felt like the music understood. Everything they couldn't say, it comforted them in a way that surprised them. Classical music had become a companion for their inner world. It didn't judge or demand or pressure. It simply stayed, softly, like a gentle presence. They kept discovering new pieces over the next few weeks. Some made them tear up a little. Some made them smile. Some made them quiet. Some made them think deeply. Each one added something to their journey. They didn't know where this journey would lead, but they knew it had already changed something important. They had learned to slow down, to listen, to feel. They had learned that even in a noisy world, there were moments of peace waiting quietly between the notes. And with each new masterpiece they discovered, they felt more connected to themselves and to a world of emotions they had never taken the time to explore before. Sharing classical music with others began in the simplest way. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something they thought they would ever do. It started almost by accident, like a quiet ripple spreading out from a single drop. One day, while sitting with a coworker during a short break, they were talking about stress, long days, and how hard it was to stay focused. The coworker looked tired, rubbing their forehead as if the weight of the whole week had settled there. Without thinking too much, they mentioned a piece they had been listening to. "It helped me feel calm last night," they said softly. The coworker raised an eyebrow. "Classical music." They nodded, a little unsure of how it would be received. "Just try it. Maybe you'll like it," the coworker shrugged, but took out their phone and saved the title. They didn't expect anything to come of it. But the next day, the coworker walked over with a small smile. "That thing you sent? It actually helped," they said. "I felt relaxed for the first time in a while." Hearing that made their heart warm. They didn't know why it mattered so much, but it did. Something about the idea that a piece of music's something that helped them could help someone else. Two made everything feel meaningful. After that, they started sharing small pieces naturally. Not constantly, not aggressively, but gently. When someone mentioned they felt anxious, they shared a soft nocturne. When someone talked about trouble sleeping, they shared a calm Debussy track. When someone felt low on energy, they shared something bright by Mozart, and people responded. Some listened just once. Some listened many times. Some said nothing, but later admitted they saved the piece because it made them feel peaceful. It felt like they were giving tiny gifts. little pockets of calmness in a world that moved too fast. A few weeks later, they visited a nearby library to return a book. As they walked through the quiet aisles, they saw a small poster, "Community Music Evening, Share Your Favorite Song." It wasn't a formal event. It was just a small community gathering where people played music they loved. They hesitated, unsure if they should go. They weren't a performer, not even close. They didn't know much about music technically. They only knew how it made them feel. But something inside them whispered that maybe someone else in that room needed to hear a piece that had once brought comfort to them. So they went. The gathering took place in a cozy room inside the library. Chairs were arranged in a loose circle. People of different ages sat there, chatting softly. Some held phones. Some held instruments. Some just sat quietly. When it was their turn, they didn't stand dramatically or try to explain everything. They simply said, "I want to share something that helped me on a quiet night." They played a short Chopin nocturne from their phone. The room fell silent. The melody floated gently, filling the small space with softness. A few people closed their eyes. Some leaned back, letting the notes wash over them. One person smiled faintly, as if recalling a forgotten memory. When the piece ended, there wasn't loud applause, just a soft, warm appreciation. People nodded, some saying they loved it. One older person approached them later and said the music reminded them of someone they once cared about. Another said it helped them feel calm after a stressful week. Hearing these quiet reactions made them realize that music didn't need a grand stage or thousands of listeners to matter. It could create magic even in a room of 10 people. They began visiting the library musical evenings more often. Each time they shared a different piece, sometimes something bright, sometimes something soothing. They didn't explain the history or the composition. They simply shared the emotion. Over time, people began to ask them for recommendations. "Do you have something peaceful I can listen to tonight? What's good for concentration? What about something hopeful?" It surprised them how naturally these conversations flowed. They had become the person people turned to when they needed music to match a feeling. This didn't make them feel important. It made them feel connected. One Saturday morning, they visited a small community center where children gathered for weekend activities. A friend who worked there asked if they could guide a short session on music that helps you relax. They almost refused. They weren't a teacher. Not an expert, but the friend assured them it didn't need to be complicated. Just share what you love. They said so. They agreed. The room was lively with young faces. Some curious, some distracted, some energetic. They didn't try to lecture. Instead, they sat with the group and asked a simple question. What kind of music makes you feel peaceful? The answers were playful. Some mentioned rain sounds, some mentioned soft songs, one mentioned the sound of wind. They smiled, listening carefully. Then they played a short piece by Mozart Light. Cheerful, gentle. The children listened quietly at first. Then some began to sway lightly. One child closed their eyes. Another tapped their fingers on their legs. When the piece ended, they asked, "How did that make you feel?" The answers surprised them. It felt like morning. It made me imagine flowers. It felt soft. It made me want to draw. They realized that even children, without understanding the technical details of music, could feel its warmth. Music didn't need explanation. It needed presence. After that session, the community center invited them again. They didn't play long pieces, just short ones, enough to make the children feel something gentle. They saw how music helped the room settle, how it made quiet moments easier. Sharing music became part of their daily habit. They made small playlists and shared them with people going through tough times. They created calming mixes for late nights, bright ones for tiring mornings, soothing ones for moments of stress. Some people wrote back to say the music helped them sleep. Others said it helped them stay focused at work. Some simply said they had never realized classical music could feel so comforting. One evening, browsing online forums, they found a group where people shared music discoveries. They posted a few pieces that meant a lot to them. They didn't expect much, but within days, their posts received comments from people all around the world. "This piece gave me peace tonight. I cried a little listening to it. but in a good way. I never listened to classical before, but now I will. Reading those messages made them feel something deep. They had always thought of music as something personal, but now they saw how it could connect strangers, people living far apart, speaking different languages, carrying different lives, all through one melody. A few months after discovering the music box, their life felt different, not perfect. Not magically transformed, but more meaningful. More open. More connected, they found themselves appreciating small moments, a cup of warm tea, a quiet morning, a peaceful walk, a friendly conversation. Music had taught them to slow down and notice the things they once ignored. One night, they sat by their desk with the old wooden music box in front of them. They wound it gently and let the familiar melody begin. It felt like greeting an old friend. They thought about how everything started with this small box, how a simple tune led them to a concert hall, and to late-night playlists. Then to Chopin, Debussy, Mozart, and Beethoven. How it led them to share music with coworkers, friends, children, strangers. They realized they weren't just listening to classical music anymore. They were living with it, and in sharing it, they felt like they were giving pieces of calmness and hope to others. It wasn't a big mission or a grand goal. It was something natural, something that flowed from the heart. The more they shared, the more they understood something important. Music is one of the simplest ways for humans to connect, and sometimes a quiet melody can touch someone's heart more deeply than 1,000 words. As they sat there listening to the music box play its final notes, they knew this wasn't the end of their journey. It was just the beginning. A world of legendary masterpieces was still waiting, full of emotions they hadn't felt yet, stories they hadn't heard yet, and moments they hadn't lived yet. And they were ready to continue, one melody at a time. He woke up on a quiet morning with a feeling he could not fully describe. It was gentle, calm, almost like a soft melody waiting for him to listen. The journey he had taken with classical music over the past months had changed him in ways he did not expect. It had opened parts of his mind that he never explored before, and it had given him comfort in moments when life felt heavy. Now, as he stood by the window and looked out at the slow rise of the sun, he thought about how everything began so simply. He only wanted to understand why people said these old works were special. But somewhere along the way, he found that the music had become something more personal, almost like an old friend that understood him without words. He moved through his small room, collecting the notes he had written during the journey. Most of them were not about the history of the music or the technical details. They were small thoughts about feelings, memories, and the strange way certain sounds could make him calm. He had never realized how much he wrote until he saw the pages gathered in a stack. Each one carried a moment from his life that he had tried to make sense of. Some notes were written on days when he felt lost, and others were written when he felt full of hope. And when he read them again, he could almost hear the music that played in the background during those moments. Later in the day, he decided to take a walk. The neighborhood streets were calm, with only a few people outside. As he walked, he found himself thinking about the people he had met throughout this journey. Each one had shared something with him. Not through long conversations, but through small gestures, small stories, small moments. Like the older shopkeeper who always played soft music in the afternoon, or the quiet man at the library who loved to listen to orchestra recordings after work. These people were never close friends, but they had shaped the experience in their own gentle ways. He passed by the park, where he had sat many times while listening to music. Today, the air was still, with only a few leaves moving on the ground. He sat on the same wooden bench he often returned to. This spot had become a place of reflection for him, a place where he would sit with his headphones and let the world fade into the background. He remembered listening to a piano piece here for the first time. At that moment, he felt something shift inside him, something small but strong. It was the feeling of being connected to something bigger, something beyond his everyday routine. As he sat there now, without music playing, he noticed how quiet everything was. He thought about how much the music had changed the way he listened to silence too. Before, silence felt empty. Now, silence felt alive, full of space where thoughts could breathe. He liked that. It made him feel more present, more grounded. He stayed in the park for a long time, letting his thoughts wander. He remembered the challenges he faced during his journey days, when he questioned himself, days when things felt too heavy. But every time he listened to the music, something inside him softened. The melodies reminded him that he was not alone in his feelings. Someone long ago had felt something similar and had turned those feelings into sound. That thought brought him comfort again and again. Later, he walked to a small cafe that he had visited many times. It was a simple place with old chairs and the sound of a small fan humming in the corner. The person behind the counter smiled softly at him. He ordered tea and sat near the window. He liked this spot because he could watch people pass by while he wrote in his notebook. Today, he decided not to write anything yet. He just watched the world move slowly. He noticed a young student struggling with heavy books, trying to balance them while opening the cafe door. An older man stepped forward quietly and held the door for the student without saying a word. The student smiled and nodded. It was a small moment, but it made him think again about how many simple acts go unnoticed. He thought about how classical music had taught him to observe these small things, see the world with more softness and less hurry. When his tea arrived, the warmth of the cup felt calming in his hands. He took a sip and let the heat settle in his chest. It reminded him of how certain music pieces felt slow, warm, and gentle, like something embracing him from the inside. He stayed there for almost an hour, thinking, watching, breathing. It felt good not to rush. As the day continued, he returned home with a new sense of clarity. He knew that this journey was reaching its final chapter, but the lessons would stay with him. He sat by his desk, opened a new page in his notebook, and started to write. This time the words came slowly, naturally. He wrote about how the journey started with curiosity but ended with understanding. He wrote about how classical music had shown him beauty in quiet moments and strength in soft emotions. He wrote about how it made him feel more human. By the time he finished, it was evening. The sky outside was a deep shade of orange, fading into blue. He stood by the window again and watched the last bit of daylight disappear. He thought about all the moments he experienced during this journey, the peaceful ones, confusing ones, the emotional ones. They all felt connected like different notes in a long piece of music. He reached for his headphones. But this time he didn't play anything. He simply stood there, listening to the quiet. And in the quiet, he felt a calm sense of closure. He knew that the journey was complete, but not in an ending kind of way. It was complete in the way a story becomes part of someone's life. He smiled softly. He realized that these legendary, classical works were not just something to listen to once. They were something to return to again and again as life continued to change. They were a reminder that beauty can be found anywhere, even in the gentle moments of an ordinary day, and with that understanding, he closed his notebook and let the quiet fill the room. Feeling grateful for everything the journey had given him, he woke the next morning with a quiet feeling inside him, the kind that doesn't arrive with noise or excitement but settles slowly, like warm sunlight spreading across the floor. Even though he had already completed what felt like the final chapter of his journey, something in him knew the story wasn't truly over. Life never stops moving, and neither do the small changes that shape a person over time. He realized that classical music was no longer something he explored out of curiosity. It had become part of his daily rhythm, part of the way he understood the world. And this new chapter, whatever it would become, started just like that, quietly, naturally. Without any pressure, he made tea and sat near the window. The street below was waking up slowly, with a few people walking to work and others sweeping outside their shops. He watched them for a moment and thought about how different he felt compared to months ago. Back then, everything felt rushed. Now, even watching ordinary moments gave him a sense of calm. Maybe it was because the music had changed how he paid attention. Maybe it taught him to listen not just with his ears, but with his mind. He took out his notebook again. He didn't plan to write anything specific, but he liked having it near him. It reminded him of all the thoughts, memories, and small reflections he had written along the way. Today, instead of writing about music, he wrote about the small things he noticed, like the way the light hit the side of a building, or how the sound of a bicycle passing by blended softly with the morning air. He found himself smiling at how simple these thoughts were, but they felt meaningful in their own way. Later, he decided to visit a part of town he hadn't been to in a long time. It was a quiet area with old houses, small shops, and a narrow path that led to a peaceful garden. When he arrived, he felt a wave of nostalgia. He used to come here often as a child, long before he knew anything about classical music or the kind of feelings it could bring out in him. Standing there, he felt both like his younger self and the person he had become. He walked slowly through the garden. The trees looked taller than he remembered, and the flowers seemed brighter. There were only a few people around, a couple sitting on a bench. An elderly man reading, a child chasing butterflies with soft laughter trailing behind. The place felt alive in a gentle way. He sat on a bench under a tree and closed his eyes, letting the soft breeze brush against his face. Even without music playing, he felt the same peace that classical works often gave him. He realized that the music had taught him how to feel this peace, even in silence. It trained his mind to slow down, breathe, observe, and appreciate. It taught him that not every moment of life needs to be loud or filled with action. Some of the most powerful moments are the ones that happen quietly. He spent a long time there, thinking about how much he had learned it, not just from the music, but from the people he encountered along the journey. Each person taught him something small. The shopkeeper reminded him that quiet routines have their own beauty. The man in the library showed him how a simple passion can bring joy. The student at the cafe reminded him of determination. Even strangers who never spoke to him directly had unknowingly shaped his experience. When he left the garden, he felt lighter. He walked through the streets slowly, letting his thoughts drift wherever they wanted to go. He entered a small bookstore he had passed many times but never visited. The place smelled of old paper, and the shelves were filled with books stacked unevenly. The owner nodded at him politely. He wandered around until he found a small section with books about music. They weren't technical books, more like personal reflections from people who had loved music deeply. He picked up one book, flipped through its pages, and read a short passage about how music becomes a companion in different stages of life. The writer described how certain melodies felt like old friends who returned just when they were needed. The words resonated with him so strongly that he closed the book for a moment and let the feeling sink in. He realized that he wasn't the only one who felt this way. People long before him had felt the same connection, same comfort. He bought the book and walked out with it tucked under his arm. It felt like he had found another piece of his journey, something that would guide him forward. On his way home, he passed by a small street where someone was playing violin. The sound was simple, not from a professional musician, just a young person practicing. But even with a few imperfect notes, the music carried something honest and pure. He stopped for a moment and listened. The player didn't notice him, but that didn't matter. The music drifted through the air, mixing with the soft noise of the street. It reminded him that beauty doesn't need perfection. Genuine emotion is enough. When he reached home, he made himself comfortable and opened the new book. As he read, he felt inspired to write again. Not about music this time, but about his experiences, people he met, the growth he felt, and the new way he looked at the world. His handwriting flowed naturally. He wasn't trying to make it sound beautiful. It simply came from the heart. Evening arrived slowly. He looked outside to see the sky turning purple and gold, the colors blending softly. He realized something important. This journey wasn't just about classical works. It was about understanding life through them. The music had been a guide, a mirror, and sometimes a quiet escape. But life itself, the people, the moments. The feelings had been the true story. He turned off the lights except for a small lamp near his desk. The soft glow filled the room. He sat quietly, letting his mind wander. He thought about everything he had experienced so far, and instead of feeling an ending, he felt a beginning. The journey didn't end with discovering the music. It continued with how he lived from now on. He felt grateful not in a loud or dramatic way, but in a calm, sincere way. Grateful for the music, for the people, for the silence, for the lessons. Grateful for becoming someone who could appreciate things he once overlooked before going to sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed and breathed deeply, letting the calm fill him once more. He didn't need to listen to music tonight. The peace was already there. He smiled softly in the quiet room. He knew that life would keep changing, and he would keep learning. And whenever he needed clarity, comfort, or inspiration, the music had the memories of this journey would be there, waiting for him like an old friend reaching out with gentle hands. And so, his story continued not with an ending, but with a quiet promise to himself to live slowly, to listen deeply, to notice the small things, and to carry the music within him, always.